On this episode of AV Week, we talk about counterfeit AV products. Quartronics is picking up Calibre, and how do you best spec projectors and screens? All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 313, recorded Friday, August 25th, 2017. Stark contrast.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Harman International and by Vadio, a leading manufacturer of professional PTZ cameras, Pro AV solutions, and UCC integration systems.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to talk about all things AV-related, Mr. Josh Schrago from TCOM. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Good morning to all you East Coasters who have already passed noon at this point.
Well, East Coasters and Central Timers, because it's already 1 o'clock here. So
yeah, those flyover states are in there too.
Wow. Okay. And another fellow Californian, and I don't know how on earth I did this, but hey, what the heck? Mr. Mark Coxon, how are you, sir?
How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing
You know,
good.
I just want to interject one thing right here in this point of time.
Oh, God. So really quickly, and I literally going to take 30 seconds on this. Mark and Josh actually used to have a program on our fine network where they would battle. They would mentally battle. And I'll put a link into it on the show notes. It was a good show. It was a good show. It's called AV Crosstalk. They debated a number of different topics, and you can check that out on our website if you would. But yeah, not quite sure how I ended up doing this, but I should fire my producer. Unfortunately, that's me. So let's kick this off here, if we would, please. First story up here, guys. Harman, and Harman is not unique in this. Let me start with that. But it's a good story on Sound and Communication about Harman fighting counterfeiting worldwide with law enforcement raids. And if you're not watching the video, there's a pretty picture of a bunch of DBX boxes, counterfeit DBX products. Mark, I want to start with you because you are our token manufacturer on this episode. How do manufacturers do this? And you read the story. Harman is a big multinational corporation, obviously part of Samsung now. They've got some pull with some countries, right? So they've got a good foothold. But you look at smaller companies who maybe just manufacture in the U.S. and maybe have some international distribution. What is the best way for AV manufacturers to maintain their product, right? To protect their intellectual property and to protect, honestly, their customers overseas?
Yeah, I think part of the problem is just figuring out when it's happening. Yeah. I mean, how do you know that somebody's making a DSP and slapping your logo on it until you get a customer that calls and says, hey, this thing is broken. And you ask them what the serial number is, and it's a unit that doesn't exist. I think that's the first problem, especially if you're a small manufacturer. I would say if you're a small manufacturer, you probably don't have a whole lot of problem with somebody stealing your brand, because if nobody knows your brand, there's no point to stealing it. Honestly, I think the guys that made these DBX DSPs or amplifiers or whatever they've made and thrown in the box, realized it was a lot easier to make a sticker than it was to actually make a DSP. So why not just put somebody else's sticker on your box and cash in on their name brand? It's obviously a huge problem. I know Sony fought that problem when I was on the residential side quite a bit with gray market gear and stuff like that too, where we, even manufacturers trying to find stuff that's sold outside the region is hard. If we make stuff for South America and somebody gets a hold of it up here and sells it for 30% off, but everything's in Spanish and it doesn't meet US codes and UL listings, we don't find that out until, again, somebody calls. So I think the biggest challenge is trying to figure out, who's selling it and where it's coming from to even know it's out there. My sister-in-law, she's an intellectual property attorney for Intel. So, and they're the biggest, I guess they win more cases for IP infringement than anybody in the world. But so that's her thing. And they're constantly fighting. I mean, she's the head of a very large group that all they do is, find people slapping Pentium stickers on computers in China. And it takes a full-time legal team. And if you don't have a full-time legal team, I don't know that you ever get ahead of that problem. I think somebody as big as Harman, the only reason they're able to do it is because of how large they are. The little guys aren't gonna be able to do it.
So real quickly, walk me through this. You get a call. So I've got a product. I buy a product, and let's be honest here. I buy it from Amazon or for somebody online. Most likely, I didn't buy it from an integrator, right? So let's start with that process. To prevent some of this is make sure you're getting it from a reputable dealer. Make
Correct.
sure you're getting it from a reputable integrator. But let's say I get a product and I call Vadio, I call Milestone, I call somebody in there and say, I have this product. Here's the serial numbers XYZ123, right? And my buddy Mark's like, dude, that didn't even exist. What happens next?
Usually everybody in the office is running around trying to figure out how we release the camera without a serial number. The first thought that crosses your mind isn't that somebody copied your product, honestly. The first thought that crosses your mind is you had some data or clerical error or something's going on. They're reading the sticker wrong. Usually you start having them send you a picture of the product, honestly. If that doesn't match up, I just think they're reading the wrong spot. They're giving me wrong data. Can you send me a picture of that screen label, of that camera sticker, of what you're looking at? Because it doesn't make sense to me. And then once we start to see it, then we can isolate, hey, wait a second, we have a problem here. But yeah, I mean, I think our first response, at least from what I've seen, anytime we get data like that, is that, we must be making a mistake. The customer's got the product, it's got our logo on it, right? Why don't we have the data on it? But yeah, I mean, it's a mess. I mean, it definitely scrambles people for a few minutes before you figure out how to proceed.
All right, Mr. Strego, from a consultant standpoint, integrator standpoint, and you actually used to work for a manufacturer also, so you've got, take it from all three sides here. How do we prevent this just in the industry, whether it's from a technology manager standpoint, how to make sure that the products I'm getting are came from the manufacturer it says it came from, but also from the consultant side, is there language you can put in your specs and in your drawings that says, you know what, you will use actual honest to goodness Vadio products?
The fact is, we don't control how they source their product.
Okay.
We cannot do anything about where they choose to source their product, because we can't say you have to be an authorized dealer unless there's some form of certification. And we can say, we can put in there that in order to bid on this project, you have to be a certified dealer of the products that we are specifying, or a certified dealer for products that require programming. But if it's a mixer, like I worked for TOA, we made mixer amplifiers. You don't certify people on mixer amplifiers. They're mixer amplifiers. They plug things in and they turn knobs. That's literally all they do. And we used to run into this all the time of Chinese factories taking the blueprints that they were handed to build the product for us and then continuing to build the products and reselling them elsewhere. Now, they weren't authorized products, but they were utilizing our specifications. They were utilizing our plans as to how to design these things. And it would hit, and here's the thing, and no one listening to this is going to be shocked by the fact that my answer is going to be government regulations involving these. This is a lot of what's going on with the debate about the Trans-Pacific partnerships.
Yeah.
And how it gets involved with our relationship with China and our relationship with manufacturing and how all of these things come together. So one of the things that we're trying to do is, one of the things that we have an issue with is the fact that the copyright law for the US is stricter than that of many other countries. So while a copyright or a trademark may last longer here, it doesn't necessarily last as long overseas. So how do you enforce that? And this is where the large legal teams come into play as to, well, you have to understand what the copyright law is for intellectual property in those places versus intellectual property here, and how all of those things come together. So what is it, where was the infringement taking place? Just because it was, in this case, the story was products were being sold in Brazil. Well, was it made in Brazil? Was it made in China and sent to Brazil? So where is the infringement actually taking place if these people were just getting these products? It becomes a little bit more difficult to figure that out. So it's negotiation of, and now you're talking about international treaties, and you're talking about contracts with manufacturing groups. And I mean, it gets horribly, horribly complicated very, very fast. And there's really no simple way to stop it other than to work with partners that you trust. Work with integrators that you trust. But, you know, from a consultant perspective, TCOM is a global company. TCOM being a global company means that we're working with projects not necessarily in, let's call it the industrialized nations of, we're not dealing with necessarily just Europe or just the United States. We could also be dealing with places that, like Brazil. We could be doing a project down there potentially. The opportunities exist right now. Think about building the Olympics. With all those stadiums, there was a lot of technology going in those circumstances. Where did they source that product from?
Yeah.
And so understanding your partnerships, knowing who your partners are, talking to your manufacturers to find out how they sell into that region is a big part of it, because a lot of them may not have offices in those regions. You may have to sell through distribution, and then you want to make sure who the authorized distribution partners are, and you need to it's basically, you have to do your due diligence to trace that line to make sure that they're getting real product, as opposed to something with an XLR input, an XLR output, and a few blinky lights to say that it's actually passing signal. Wow, they call it an audio optimizer.
Well, to Tim's point and to your point, Josh, I know we have a lot of dealers that call us at Milestone and ask us for letters for their end users saying that they're an authorized dealer of our 3 product lines, Chief, Audio, and Daylight. And so some of those end users are out there asking for a letter from the manufacturer stating that you're authorized to resell their products. And I think that could go a long way, because if they're able to get that from the manufacturer, obviously they're probably sourcing that from a place that the manufacturer approves. So,
yeah. Real quickly, Josh, because I don't want to beat this one to death. How does the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, impact this, especially for the world of AV?
So the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as it was written but not enforced, changed the way that it basically tried to enforce American copyright law internationally, and say that if you have to abide by what we're doing, and you have to enforce our rules, and you have to do our thing. So it was trying to get all of the nations involved, but it wasn't just us involving it, because we're not the ones writing it alone. We're writing it in conjunction with other people. So how the TPP worked was, it was just saying, okay, well, based on this, we're going to, Japan and China and the other members that were involved in this conversation are going to take this information and apply it as to how trade is going to work, as to how copyright, intellectual property is going to work, and that all comes together with these groups of people. And it was an issue during I know it came up during the election, so I know some people probably are familiar with the term. At this point in time, it hasn't been enforced, and at this point in time, they're renegotiating, but what it actually is going to entail. So we're still trying to figure all that out right now. There's nothing set in stone, at least that I've seen lately. Okay,
yeah, you're right. There's nothing set in stone. They are in the process of renegotiating it. All right, guys, next story here comes to us from our friends over at AV Network. Coretronic Corporation is a Taiwanese-based corporation, picked up Calibre, and Calibre is a UK organization. If you're not familiar with Coretronic, and you may not be, mainly because they're the manufacturer for a lot of projectors, so you're probably not going to see a Coretronic booth at say Infocom, but you're going to see their products because they're the people that make a lot of the projectors. Josh, I'm going to start with you on here. The reason given in the story is that this is going to allow Coretronic to increase their capacity, especially using Calibre's what's called HQ Ultra image processing and in-house R&D capabilities. How big of a jump does this make, not just for Coretronic, but also for the projector manufacturers that utilize Coretronic as an ODM?
Well, it's really significant when you start getting another merger and acquisition in this industry, where again, they're buying it for specific development reasons, so that way they can improve their product line, so that way they can make a better offering. And because projection, it's funny, projection is on the down slope in terms of its bright and shiny nature of it. It's less illuminating for most people to think about projectors.
Very nice.
So if I can get any more in here on this one. But in stark contrast, we often see.
I need a drum. I need a snare drum. Where's my snare drum?
I had.
He'll be here all week, folks.
I had to. I mean, it's not as projection just isn't as bright and shiny for a lot of people. There are clients that will literally say, I don't want a projector. It can't produce as great an image. And so they're facing that stigma right now. Whether or not it's true in typically speaking, it may or may not be given the application. You have to account for the fact that projectors don't have they carry a stigma with them of people think of, oh, well, it's just a classroom, or, oh, that's the old way we did things. Now we can put a bright and shiny display in front, or we can put a video wall in front, or even if they have enough money, we can put LED up front, when those may or may not be the best solution for them based on what they're trying to do. And so by continually improving the image quality and improving the image engine of what these projectors are capable of showing, and some of these projectors are absolutely incredible. Some of the things Christy and Barca were showing at Infocom this year were amazing. And then you pair it with screen manufacturers that have started to take into account ambient light rejection, like daylight or DNP and Premiere and the screen innovations, and you start to see the things that these guys are doing, and you start pairing these things together, the image quality goes up drastically. Yes, there might be a little bit of a pitch to get people to buy into what they would consider to be old technology, but the performance aspect. And so by constantly improving these engines that are behind these visual images, you're able to move forward and you're able to demonstrate that this can provide them with a better solution, even though it may carry this stigma with it.
All right. Mr. Coxon, before you worked for Value, you also worked for Daylight, another company for Milestone. So you also got a good perspective on this. How does this help not just Coretronic and the manufacturers that are using them, but like Josh says, the end user really kind of understand that projectors are not dead by any stretch of the imagination. And by extension, projection screens are not dead by any stretch of the imagination. But help them understand, projectors can still do some pretty wicked things.
Yeah. I mean, even if you just look at things like projection mapping and all those things, I mean, if you're talking about things where flat panels and LED aren't going to work, if you want to light up the outside of the Disney concert hall and make it like Fantasia came to life on the outside of the building, you're not going to do that with an LED screen. You're going to use the architecture and you're going to projection map. And what Coretronics is doing is they're investing in scaling, warping, blending, image processing hardware that makes that stuff happen. So, they're going out there and getting into the same kind of market that maybe Christie is with Spider, where they have these products that allow you to do things with projectors that you can't do with screens, number one. But number two, also, like Josh said, optimize them for other areas. One of the interesting things I saw in this story, though, was that, Coretronics themselves are saying they really see this as a way for them to get into the LED market, though, as well, and the video wall market. Because as their category shrinks, as the natural curve of projection, as far as at least the amount of applications goes down, they don't want to be losing revenue stream and become irrelevant. They need to be investing in technology that allows them to transition, even if they're not an LED manufacturer or an LCD screen manufacturer, allows them to transition into those other markets. Because if your little pet OLED, Tim, comes to fruition like it should,
it will.
And I can go out and roll, a 40-foot tall by 100-foot wall with LED film and put a small box in the corner of it to send images to it. I'm going to need a really nice image processor to fill all those pixels. Yeah. And Coretronics is positioning themselves to be at least in that side with this Caliber acquisition. So it's not only something that boosts their current business, but it builds their bridge into a future business that they can actually transition into over time, and hopefully they can keep that revenue stream constant as the markets ebb and flow. So,
no, eventually, one day,
hopefully,
my grandchildren may be enjoying OLED. Just saying.
There you go. Yeah, they'll have OLED clothing.
Just
program in what they want. Like I want Bermuda shorts and a plaid shirt today. Like what you're wearing. I know
exactly what I'm wearing. Yeah, some Bermuda shorts, probably a plaid shirt. All right, last story here comes to us from a commercial integrator, and actually this rolls right into our two fine guests here. What to include in an RFP when choosing a projector and screen? So, Mr. Coxon, I'll start with you. What do you include in an RFP when you're choosing a projector and screen?
The word daylight. No, if you include Hey, what? Sorry. No, when you
No,
know,
no,
Isn't
sorry, what'd you
you're
do?
accounting for daylight, or you actually want me
No.
to just write daylight continuously in the RFP?
No, I mean, I think there are definitely things that we see in the RFP. I did a lot of lunch and learns with architects, AIA presentations, and we talked specifically about, when you're writing an RFP or when you're looking for a projection screen, what are the things that you first need to consider? And so, the things that I always wanted people to write into RFP were the proper screen size. Now, I don't care if it's an LED wall, I don't care if it's a flat panel, I don't care if it's a video wall, I don't care if it's a projection screen. But number one, just sizing the image, whatever that image happens to be produced
For that space.
for that space. So, number one, first and foremost, was always proper sizing. Let's get the right size in here no matter what. The other thing that we wanted to look for typically was, looking at the room space and picking, like this article said, the proper screen material for contrast. And, we have a couple things that can happen in a room. You have actual contrast, which is what the projector is producing, but you also have perceived contrast, which you can trick the eyes into seeing. So, things like black borders on screens make a difference. It's why the silver TV was the worst idea ever, because it actually made TV pictures look worse. Shiny piano black around your image makes your image look brighter because your eyes compare the brightest white to the darkest black. They don't care if the screen's projecting the black or not. If the black is in your field of view, that darkest black is your black reference. So, things like that are important. That's why high contrast screens and ambient light rejection screens usually start with a gray or almost a black base. Creates that contrast. So materials extremely important. The one caveat on size was always that you have the right viewable height of the screen. I know Josh has probably seen screens that go, to a foot off the floor, and then you got a 3-foot tall conference table in front of it. Like, good luck not using the bottom half of that screen ever. So, that was always a thing. And then projector wise, when you're looking at projectors, to kind of steal from another industry partner, one of the really kind of cool things I saw lately was, color brightness, like full color brightness. And there's a website you can go to where if you're looking at a single chip DLP projector that says it's 1,000 lumens and you punch in, it'll tell you actually how bright it is in green, red, and blue.
Oh, wow.
Because it's only that bright in white when all three colors are going at once. It is not that bright in a single chip when the other colors are present. So your image, if you're looking for 1,000 lumen projector to get 50 lumens per square foot on a 20 foot square foot screen, you may not be getting that when you're actually watching video. And so, I think it's important to say, we want a minimum brightness or we want a full color brightness of XYZ, not just 1,000 lumens, or we want to realize, 50 lumens per foot under a red, green, blue color test. So when I put green on the screen, I'm still getting 50 foot Lamberts off the screen and not 10 and then 50 on red, So I think that's a very important thing that's been out there that kind of been overlooked is that all projectors rate brightness at white, but not all projectors produce colors in the same brightness, whether it's LCD, whether it's laser, or whether it's a DLP engine with a traditional single chip.
Can you send me that tool?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
we'll put a link to it. Yeah, we'll put a link to it on the show notes. Cause that was one thing I wasn't aware was out there. So that's very useful.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Consultant, write me an RFP to choose a projector and screen.
Well, I mean, a lot of the points in the article were made very, very, very well. It was well thought out in terms of considerations. It was well thought out, but yes, screen size is vital. If I'm battling this right now in terms of, okay, well, the architecture of the room will support this, but in order to do this, either the front rows are going to have a problem or the rear rows are going to have a problem. So how do we find a way to make sure that everybody's got something to work with? Or do we have to start asking the architect to change the shape of the room? Which, of course, they always want to do for us. They're always willing to do that for us, right? I've heard this, right?
Yeah. Or they like to involve AV early and often, and they give us carte blanche to redesign spaces.
Exactly. I mean, I've been able to change the shape of things from rectangles all the way to oval, but still, it's just so we fight these battles, and yes.
By the way, that's the real unicorn in AV is a compliant architect. But go ahead.
I did not say this for any architects that are listening. But basically what it boils down to is you have to account for that, and you have to try and having partners that want to get out there and start educating is very valuable for us. One of the other big ones, and I don't know that I noticed it in here, it's like, well, it's projecting, specifying the right projector and screen. Is the projector in a booth or is the projector in the room? And no projector manufacturer actually accurately, that we found, measures dB output of the fan noise. And at what degree? Is it full? Is it 50? Is it, any degree in between? Is nobody will do it correctly because it doesn't make them look good when they do, or they don't understand how it's done, and so they don't document. So they just say, oh yeah, it's 42 dB. Where? 10 feet, 20 feet, 1 meter, 1 watt at 1 meter, as standard speaker manufacturers will do it. It's a missing specification in a lot of them as to where that measurement is taken. Is it allocating for frequencies, or is it just allocating for average SPL? Like, how are we taking these into account? And so we've started, saying, well, is it better for us to bring these, get loaners of these projectors and start doing it ourselves? Because we have an acoustics division here, and we did a test run with the projector recently, and some of the findings were pretty interesting. But at the same time, that's a massive issue that we have to account for, because if you're going to put, I've got a project closing out pretty shortly here that I've got 3 9,000 lumen projectors overhead in a room seating 50 people. Is it quiet in there? It can be. It's not always quiet. Like, if those things have been running all day, it's going to get a little noisy. But we need to make sure that that's understood, and that has to be included in the RFP, as to ensuring what the levels are going to be, or ensuring how to mask those levels in some way. Contrast is absolutely vital. Brightness is vital. The other one that's big for me is, if you're going to be in a room with where ambient light is a consideration that has to be taken into account, what direction, north, south, east, or west, are the windows facing? Having that information, so that, because the thing is, I could say that I want the same projector and same screen in all these rooms, but in the rooms where they are south face, where the windows might be southern exposure windows, I may need to ensure that we are operating at 100% brightness, whereas in the rooms that are northern exposure, I could potentially reduce that to 75 or 60%, because I don't have to deal with direct sunlight at any point during the day. Yeah. So little things like that in the RFP can ensure greater success over the course of a project, because while the experience may vary throughout each of the rooms, they accommodate for the environment, because each of the rooms needs to be designed based on the environmental conditions that they have, not necessarily, I want everything the same in every room. So you want the room to function in the same fashion, but there can be subtle differences to ensure optimized performance based on those conditions.
All right.
Are you a consultant, Josh?
No, no. I'm a tech policy pundit.
Well, you're that too. So. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Strego. How do people find you and or TCOM?
You can find TCOM at teecom.com. We are a San Francisco Bay Area consultant with offices in Portland in the UK, but you can find me on Twitter at JSRAGO. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty proud of a couple of things that have been coming up lately. So recently published The Self-Hating Technologist, parts 1 and 2 on AVNation.tv. Yep. You can find some of my work at soundreason.org. And then upcoming in September and October, I've got a 2-part piece for sound and communications on AV network security things, and some advice and some recommendations. And if you want to come and talk to me about IoT and tech policy and security, you can come find me at the Almo E4 show on September 19th, I believe it is, or 20th. Go to almoe4tour.com and you can take a look and find out the exact date. But we'll be up in New Jersey for the day, so we're going to be out there talking about IoT, and come pay me a visit. All right, very good. Mr. Coxon, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
How do people find you?
On Twitter, I am AVPhenom, AVPhenom. That's the easiest way to find me. That's probably where I'm the most active. I am on LinkedIn as well. Mark Coxon. You can find me on LinkedIn. Go to milestone.com. That's our parent company, where you will find a bunch of nicer and smarter people than me that work with 3 brands that we sell. And I really appreciate the time, Tim. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. And not to be outdone, Mr. Coxon also has a number of podcasts as well. So where do we find those?
You can find my blogging on Rave Pubs, ravepubs.com, and you can find podcast Selling AV is kind of my most consistent one. If you want a 5-minute sales manager once a week with a quick tip and maybe some application to it, check out Selling AV.
All right, very good. My name is Tim Albright. At this point, I'm rooting for the Bears already because baseball's over. Just joking. I don't like baseball, but go Bears. But go by the website, if you would, please, AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. While you're there, check out our underwriters. These are the folks who support us. Milestone is one of those, so we thank them. So check those out and let them know that you appreciate them supporting us. Also, please check out our CEDIA coverage. We'll be heading to CEDIA in about 2 weeks now. So from San Diego, Matt Scott will be there. Rich Fregosa, a couple others. Stephen Bronner will be helping us out. So we'll bring all of the fun stuff from San Diego, and I believe Mr. Coxon is going to come down for that too. So I'm
trying to get down. It's in my backyard, so yeah, it's an hour drive. So I think I'll show up.
You should come down. Be a fun time. Time in San Diego. So, but all that stuff is at AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. This has been AV Week.